We're counting down the 15 school lunch items every Canadian kid misses most, from quirky snack box inventions and iconic cafeteria desserts to the treats that once ruled playground trades. These aren't just foods. They're flashbacks to lunchbox rituals, lost flavors, and the shared traditions shaped by shifting nutrition rules, long-gone brands, and Canada's unique regional staples, ready to relive the sensory moments that made lunchtime special. Let's start our nostalgic journey with number 15. Number 15 is the McCain Deep and Delicious Individual Cake, a lunchbox legend for anyone who grew up in Ontario, Quebec, or the Maritimes. Packed snug in its plastic dome, this single-serve cake felt like a birthday party tucked into your lunch every time. The swirl of thick chocolate frosting was unmistakable, and the cool, heavy weight in your hand promised a sugary escape from the ordinary sandwich routine. Kids would trade half their snacks just for a bite, and the brand's New Brunswick roots gave it coast-to-coast credibility. For years, these cakes were a status symbol, showing up in lunchrooms and on playground benches from Halifax to Toronto. But as school nutrition rules tightened and sugar caps rolled in, deep and delicious cakes became a rare sight, leaving only the memory of that fudgy smell and the quiet thrill of peeling back the plastic for dessert before the bell. Schneider's Lunchmate and Kraft Handy Snacks brought a whole new level of lunchtime fun to the Canadian school table. Inside every Lunchmate, you would find a plastic tray with neat compartments, one for crackers, one for slices of deli meat or cheese, and always a little red spreader to do the job. Kraft's Handy Snacks kept it simple. Breadsticks or crackers with a pool of bright, salty cheese spread. The best part was the ritual, peeling back the foil, snapping the red stick out, and building each bite just the way you liked it. These snacks were not just about eating. They were about assembly, about showing off your stacking skills, and sometimes about trading that last cracker for a friend's pudding cup. The snap of the tray, the salty whiff of cheese, and the feel of that tiny spreader. Those moments defined a coast-to-coast snack culture that is hard to find in today's allergy-aware, nutrition-focused schools. Joss. Lewis snack cakes were more than just a dessert. They were a symbol of Quebec pride and a lunchtime highlight for kids across central and eastern Canada. Wrapped in shiny red foil, each Joss, Louis promised a soft chocolate cake, creamy filling, and a hit of sweetness that could turn an ordinary lunch into something special. These cakes weren't just found in lunchboxes. They showed up on school fundraiser order forms, making them a common treat in Ontario and New Brunswick too. The ritual of unwrapping that foil, feeling the cake squish between your fingers, and comparing trade value with friends was a familiar part of the lunch hour. But when trans fat bans swept through schools in the late 2000s, the original recipe had to change. And Joss. Lewis lost its spot in many cafeterias. Still, the memory of red crumbs and that unmistakable chocolatey rush lingers for anyone who grew up with Vachon's iconic snack. Hostess Hickory Sticks were the salty secret of every Canadian kid's lunchbox. Packed in school-size bags, these thin, smoky potato sticks felt like contraband pulled from the depths of a backpack. The ritual started with the snap of the crinkly bag. Then came that unmistakable hickory scent, a cloud of chip dust rising as you reached in. Hickory sticks weren't just a snack, they were a playground currency, traded one greasy handful at a time. Only found in Canada, they made snack time feel like an exclusive club, especially in urban Ontario and Manitoba where vending machines ruled the halls. But after 2010, when vending contracts vanished under new nutrition policies, hickory sticks all but disappeared from schools. The smoky dust left behind on your fingers is now just a memory of a mischievous coast-to-coast snack ritual lost to the health food era. Nothing said Canadian school lunch quite like the snap of a foil-tipped straw plunging into a Kool-Aid jammer or Five Alive juice box. These drinks were everywhere, tucked beside sandwiches lined up on field trip checklists, and passed around on hot dog days from coast to coast. The ritual was unmistakable. That sharp pop as you pierced the pouch, the rush of bright sugary liquid, and the cold condensation on your palm. McCain juice boxes, stamped with bold fruit graphics, were a staple in lunchrooms from PEI to Vancouver Island, while Five Alive's citrus punch promised a taste that outlasted recess. For years, these drinks were a lunchtime status symbol, traded and collected for their wild flavors and colorful packaging. But as Canada's school policies shifted to water and plain milk, the juice box era faded. Today, the sound of a straw hitting foil is just a memory, a fizzy echo of the days when sugar-fueled chatter filled cafeterias across the country. Pizza Pops were a lunchtime legend in Manitoba and Ontario, but their story starts in Winnipeg, 1964, when Paul Ferrasi invented the first pizza pop in his restaurant kitchen. By the 1980s, these gooey, crimped-edge pockets were a lunchroom status symbol. If you brought a frozen pizza pop from home, you knew the real challenge was snagging a spot in the cafeteria microwave line. That line was its own community, a daily gathering where kids compared snacks, swapped stories, and watched the microwave window fog up with steam. The hiss of escaping air and the scent of bubbling cheese signaled your turn was almost up. Orange-stained napkins, a scalded tongue, and the ritual shout of "Who's next?" defined the experience. But by the late 2000s, school microwaves began to vanish. Safety memos, insurance worries, and new nutrition policies ended the era. Today, the memory of that steam-filled lunchroom lingers, even as pizza pops themselves live on in grocery aisles. Jell-O gelatin cups were a cafeteria classic, showing up on hot lunch menus all over Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes through the 1980s and 90s. Every kid knew the anticipation, the bright neon wobble catching the light as you waited in line, the foil lid resisting just enough before peeling back with a sharp snap. That first spoonful slid across your tongue, sweet, cold, and just a little slippery, while the rest of the cup shivered on your tray. Jell-O Day was more than dessert. It was a weekly ritual, a sugar cap treat that signaled a break from routine, especially when cafeteria calorie limits hadn't yet come into play. Some schools even served them in bulk, scooped from massive tubs into little plastic cups, but the store-bought single-serve packs, with their peel and plop sound, were the true prize. By the early 2000s, though, tighter nutrition rules and the push for less sugar pushed Jell-O off the menu, leaving only the memory of that wobbly, fluorescent treat and the echo of laughter as lids popped open across the lunchroom. Old Dutch all-dressed in ketchup chips turned the Canadian lunch table into a flavor battleground. Nowhere else could you find a snack that painted your fingertips red and left the sharp tang of vinegar and ketchup trailing behind you in the hallway. These weren't just chips. They were a lunchtime currency, traded for pudding cups or the last square of Joss. Lewis. In the West and Ontario, Old Dutch bags became a fixture, their bold stripes peeking out of lunchboxes and backpacks. Ketchup chips, especially, were a point of pride, unavailable in the U.S., but found in nearly every Canadian grocery aisle and school snack cart. The crinkle of the bag, the rush to grab the biggest chip, and the inevitable stained report card were all part of the ritual. When vending machines disappeared and nutrition guidelines tightened in the 2010s, these iconic flavors faded from the lunchroom. But the memory of those crimson-stained fingers still lingers for anyone who grew up trading chips at recess. Smarties were the ultimate lunchbox power move. Unlike M&Ms, these candy-coated chocolates came in a cardboard box that rattled with every shake, a sound every Canadian kid knew by heart. The ritual was half the fun. You'd pop the lid, pour out a rainbow onto your palm, and immediately start sorting or trading for the coveted red or orange ones. On the playground, Smarties weren't just a treat. They were currency, swapped for chips or the last bite of someone's Joe's. Lewis. Across Canada, that box was a lunchroom staple, outselling M&M's by a mile, and the shake and pour was a coast-to-coast habit. But as schools cracked down on candy sales, especially in BC and Quebec, Smarties lost their spot in the lunchbox economy. Nutrition policies and allergy warnings swept through, and suddenly, the familiar rattle of a Smarties box faded from the cafeteria, taking with it a whole peer-to-peer snack market and a piece of Canadian lunchtime ritual. Yogurt tubes exploded onto the scene in the late 1990s, quickly becoming a lunchbox staple from Ontario to the West Coast. Yoplate's Go-Gurt, launched in Canada in 1998, was the original squeeze-and-slurp snack, a tube of tangy, neon yogurt you could eat one-handed while trading stories at the lunch table. But Canadian kids didn't just eat them straight from the fridge. The real genius was freezing a tube overnight, then tucking it into your lunchbox to double as an ice pack. By noon, it would be half-thawed, cold, sweet, and just the right amount of slushy. Flavor choices like wild berry or cotton candy turned lunchtime into a taste test, and the packaging made it easy to swap with friends. For years, these tubes were a parent's secret weapon, keeping sandwiches cool and kids happy. But as school nutrition guidelines cut sugar and reformulated snacks, the original ultra-sweet taste faded. Today, the memory of that half-melted yogurt and the satisfying squeeze lingers, even as the tubes themselves have lost their spot in the lunchroom lineup. Chocolate and strawberry milk cartons were a daily fixture in Canadian school cafeterias through the 1980s and 1990s, especially in Ontario, Quebec, and the prairies. Kids would line up at the lunchroom fridge, grab a Nielsen or Beatrice carton, and crack it open with a practiced squeeze. The ritual was unmistakable. The snap of the cardboard, the swirl of chocolate or pink milk, and the inevitable clink as friends tapped cartons together before that first cold gulp. Colored milk mustaches were a lunchtime badge of honor, and the last chocolate ring at the bottom of the carton was always worth the effort. These flavored milks weren't just drinks. They were part of a larger school milk program, promoted by Dairy Farmers of Canada and supported by provincial dairy boards. For decades, contracts with schools ensured a steady supply, with posters and branded cartons brightening the cafeteria walls. But as nutrition guidelines zeroed in on sugar content in the 2000s, flavored milk quietly disappeared from school fridges. Today, the sound of a carton clink is just a memory, echoing the end of an era when milk breaks brought both flavor and fun to Canadian lunchrooms. Peanut butter sandwiches were once a fixture in every Canadian lunchbox, from Victoria to St. John's. The classic PB&J, soft white or whole wheat bread, Kraft or Skippy peanut butter, sometimes a swipe of strawberry jam, was the default answer to the morning lunch scramble for decades. Kids would open their lunch kits and find that familiar, slightly squished sandwich, the crust sometimes cut off, the bread sticking to the roof of your mouth with every bite. For some, it was the taste of comfort. For others, a reliable trade item at the lunch table. But everything changed in the late 1990s when the first peanut ban swept through British Columbia and Ontario schools. By 2005, nearly every Canadian school had posted signs and sent home letters warning, "No nuts, no exceptions." The shift was sudden and absolute. One year, peanut butter was everywhere. The next, it was gone. The sticky, slow-motion gulp of milk to wash down a mouthful became a memory, replaced by sunflower butter and allergy-safe alternatives. What vanished wasn't just a sandwich, but a shared ritual, one that connected generations of Canadian kids, now lost to safety and policy. Pogo sticks, those battered golden corn dogs on a stick, turned every school carnival or hot lunch day into a mini fairground, especially in Ontario and Quebec. The Pogo brand, born in Quebec in the late 1960s, became a fixture at school fundraisers and cafeteria menus through the 1980s and 1990s. Kids lined up with exact change, eyeing the foil-wrapped sleeves and waiting for that first crunch. The outer shell snapped under your teeth, giving way to a burst of sweet cornmeal and salty hot dog, while the smell of warm batter drifted through the classroom. But the real artistry came after. The ritual of squeezing out ketchup and mustard, swirling patterns with plastic knives, and comparing condiment designs with friends. Pogo days were loud, sticky, and full of laughter. The kind of event that could turn a gray winter lunchtime into something special. As nutrition policies tightened and processed meats were pushed off school menus, especially after Ontario's ppm 150 in 2011 and Quebec's healthy eating reforms, pogo sticks all but vanished from the lunchroom. What's left is the memory of carnival sauce on your fingers, the snap of the battered shell, and the brief moment when lunch felt like a party on a stick. Homemade Nanaimo bars were the crown jewel of any West Coast lunchbox, a sign that someone's grandma or parent had gone the extra mile that week. The scent of coconut and graham would drift through the hallway as you peeled away the sticky plastic wrap, sending a signal to anyone nearby that you'd scored something special. Each bar was a layered promise: crumbly base, custard yellow middle, and a glossy chocolate top that stuck to your fingers. In some classrooms, the ritual was to show off your family's recipe. Every batch a little different, every kid convinced theirs was best. These treats weren't just for eating. They were a point of pride, a way to connect home and school, and sometimes a secret weapon in the lunchroom trade economy. But as allergy warnings and no-sharing rules swept across Canadian schools in the late 1990s and early 2000s, the days of swapping Nanaimo bars or a baggie of grandma's cookies quietly ended. Bake sale flyers from as late as 1985 in Nanaimo show just how central these homemade snacks once were, before regulations made sharing off limits. The loss wasn't just about food safety. It was the end of a small, daily act of generosity and trust. For many, the memory of that sweet, coconutty smell and the pride of a home-baked treat still lingers, even as individually wrapped, store-bought snacks take their place. What's missing isn't just the taste, but the quiet connection those family recipes brought to the lunch table. Nothing brought a school together quite like Pizza Day. Once a month, the scent of bubbling cheese and oregano would drift down the hallways, announcing the arrival of oversized slices stacked in cardboard boxes. These weren't just any slices. They came straight from local pizzerias. Each school loyal to a favorite chain, whether it was Pizza Pizza in Ontario or Greco in the Maritimes. Parent volunteers hustled through the corridors, balancing trays and marking off names on sign-up sheets. For many kids, that warm, grease-soaked paper plate was a ticket to the best lunch of the month. You'd sit at your desk or gather in the lunchroom, comparing toppings and counting the bubbles on the crust, the spicy aroma lingering long after the last bite. The anticipation started days before as order forms went home in backpacks, and the promise of a hot slice overshadowed the usual sandwich routine. Pizza Day wasn't just about the food. It was a fundraiser, raising money for class trips, sports gear, or new library books. It was a rare moment when the whole school shared the same meal, no trading required, just a collective pause and a chorus of satisfied sighs. But by the late 2000s, new nutrition guidelines swept in. Provinces set strict rules on what could be served for school fundraisers: whole grain crusts, low-fat cheese, fewer processed meats. Some schools switched to healthier recipes, others cut back on pizza days altogether. And the classic pepperoni slice became a rare treat, reserved for special occasions. Still, for anyone who grew up in Canada between the 1980s and early 2010s, the memory of that warm, greasy slice and the buzz in the hallway on Pizza Day is impossible to forget. It was more than lunch. It was a celebration, a fundraiser, and a taste of freedom, all rolled into one. From the first bite of a McCain Deep and Delicious cake to the last coveted slice on school Pizza Day, our countdown of the 15 school lunch items every Canadian kid misses captures a vanished era of lunchtime rituals. The most surprising entries: like the sudden disappearance of peanut butter sandwiches and homemade Nanaimo bars, show how school policies, nutrition trends, and allergy awareness reshaped what kids could bring and share. Across all entries, the common thread is more than just taste. It's the memory of trading snacks, the pride in a homemade treat, or the anticipation of pizza day that united classrooms across provinces. Each item qualified for this list, not just for its flavor or brand, but for its role in Canada's unique lunch culture, one shaped by community, regional brands, and changing rules. The real takeaway? School lunch wasn't just about food. It was about childhood, friendship, and the rituals that made growing up in Canada unforgettable.